Life Reflection, Chapter 21, Insecurities, and Fear of Being Judged. For this whole Life Reflection series, I know that I wanted to include some sort of section or episode about insecurities, but I feel like insecurities is highly tied to judgment from others and how others perceive you, and sort of your fear around them perceiving you poorly. And recently, now that I've been ramping up on YouTube quite a bit and getting back into things, almost uploading daily on my personal channel, actually, we've been feeling that quite a lot. Just the feeling of being afraid of being judged. It's like something that I wasn't sure I got over yet, because at first, since this is a life reflection, we can talk about this from like when we were a kid, basically. We were a show-off. I think a lot of people called us a show-off. Our family did, our friends did. They would just utter the word, hey, you show off, blah, blah, blah. Whenever I would, let's say, play around on the playground and go like outside of the area of the playground where you're not technically supposed to be like climbing on, like the really high top parts or the side parts that are like, let's say on the playground there's a bridge, and then usually the bridge has rails, and then you go on the outside of the rails instead of the inside of the rails area, and that's like the second story-ish area as well. But luckily, for playgrounds, it's safe, because even if you fall, it's on like sand or that soft thing that is somewhat padded. But that was sort of like how I was back then as a kid. And I think I've always sort of continued to have that in me, that desire to sort of just show off, I suppose, just to show like my thoughts, to show like what I can do, to also, I guess, impress people, because I definitely remember trying to impress others very often when I was younger. I would do very cool athletic things, or like I thought they were cool. Like my breaking for sure was very showy as well, like doing flares, doing flips. All those things were not just because I thought it was cool to do, but because I thought it was impressive to do. And if I could do it, then I would also be impressive. So that's something that was in me ever since I was young, and it's never stopped, I suppose. But then we get towards YouTube, where we started. And when we started, it was before like the group channel and everything. That was me just documenting my progress for flares, my progress for handstands, stuff like that. I showed off a video where I did like 8 flares in a row. I showed off a video where I did a 1-minute handstand, just stuff like that I would very often do, 60 something push-ups in a row, clean form. It, again, very much still a show-off. But these days, I've been making a lot of content about things that I'm sort of like an amateur at, things that I'm a beginner at, like for instance, learning Japanese, or I'm starting to get into learning more about finance and talking about those things. And when I make videos about those things, I feel a serious case of imposter syndrome. Luckily for the Japanese videos, most of them are not really like teaching videos. They might contain education in them because it's basically me learning. Most of the majority of my Japanese learning videos are basically me learning Japanese. It's not me like trying to teach it. So I feel like I'm fine when I make those videos. But there was a video recently that I made that I titled something along the lines of like an investing tip I wish I knew in my early 20s. And in that video, I kind of talked about like Robinhood a little bit too much probably. But what I did was I just talked about the Roth IRA, the IRA thingy, and that investment thing, for the lack of a better term. Just talking about what I learned from it. I already had one and I created one in my early 20s, but I didn't realize that there's like a max value that you can contribute. So to me, that was like, I should have been contributing the max all this time, but I just haven't been doing that. And I thought that was a big mistake, so I wanted to share it. But at the same time, like maybe because I talked too much about like other things like Robinhood, and like I also mentioned how the current credit card I was using was very helpful. Like I just felt like a little bit out of my depth. Like those were the first times I've ever talked about those things on camera, even though I do believe everything I'm saying. And even though, like I also mentioned, like, you honestly can use anything you want. You don't have to use Robinhood. You don't have to use my credit card or whatever. But I think it's also because I shared like referral links to it that I felt like, man, I feel like it's very easy for people to judge me on this video, because it just seems like a video I made out of the blue, which was true because I had no plans of making the video. I researched out of nowhere and just decided to talk about it because I felt like, man, I spent a good 3 hours today researching. I should, show my findings. But maybe because I came from it as from the perspective of like, oh, I feel like I know something new and I want to teach it. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I don't know. Everything combined just made me feel very worried about being judged, very worried about like, oh, someone watching the video and being like, oh, this guy's just trying to get people to click on his referral link for Robinhood or something, or this guy has no idea what they're talking about, they're rambling too much, or like the title content somewhat, it's not a mismatch, but it's like I don't talk about the thing in the title directly, like at the very, very beginning, which honestly I should. But sometimes my content is just, at least for my personal channel, it's like I just talk a lot. And sometimes I feel like the most interesting thing that I talk about is like in the middle somewhere. And I'd rather title it to the thing that was interesting rather than like the stuff in the beginning. But that itself is kind of like a content issue that I have to deal with, a content type. And I know I shouldn't be so worried about these things because a part of me is thinking like, there's a lot of tricks to overcome this like fear of judgment, right? And one of those tricks is to just think to yourself, in about 10 years, not even 10 years, like let's say in going from 10 days, in about 10 days, is this going to be a big deal? Like, is it actually going to affect my life poorly or negatively? And if the answer is yes, then, well, that sucks, and definitely like be careful and do some things about it. But like, if you don't have the time or headspace or whatever, or it's like too hard to deal with, then think about 10 months. In 10 months, is this going to like be a concern? If the answer is no, then just move on, right? So that's what I'm trying to tell myself to do these days. And it's quite difficult because a lot of my second channel is basically me talking to the camera. Like I'm showing things that are kind of like a bit much. It's sort of like this life reflection thing. Everything is quite a bit much. It's very personal. It's very like stuff that I don't know is necessarily good to share all of it because it is kind of a lot. And I know some people out there on YouTube have mentioned like, you want to have some boundaries set and you want to like make sure you don't share everything. Like you don't want to give everything to the internet, right? For everyone to judge you. But for me personally, like I have this desire to share like everything that doesn't put me in danger. And I guess like I don't feel like this is dangerous to share my personal thoughts and my opinions, but also I just feel like it's better to live this way, to just be able to like express yourself freely. And I need to remember that. And I need to remember that that's the value I put above fear, the freedom of expression versus the fear of being judged. And it's something that, again, despite being a show off, it's something that I still like. Doing things in public, like in front of your friends and family, is completely different from doing things online publicly. I think online you don't see the faces that are commenting. You don't see people actually saying it. You sort of just read it in your own way. And it's very easy to, and I guess it's very easy for people to be mean online because of that reason. Like when you're behind a screen and a keyboard, you can just say whatever you want. There's no consequences right after saying it. But when you're in front of each other in person, or even on a voice call, it's like, you got to deal with like the other person's reaction. And I don't think that should stop you from like saying what you want, but that should certainly make you think about how you're communicating it and whether or not you're being respectful or kind of hurtful, like harmful, just mean in general. I think for me, I've never been the commenting type. I just don't comment in general. I think maybe in my whole life on like YouTube, since that's the platform I spend my most time on, I've commented less than 10 times on videos. And this is my whole life, less than 10 times. And most of those comments were me forcing myself to make comments because I read that it was a good way of like gaining exposure back then. It's like, okay, if you make a really good comment, people might look at your channel or something like that. But honestly, I just don't care now. Like I don't care to comment for that reason. I'll comment because I really want to. But generally, I just don't really want to. Regardless, we are definitely a poster. We're someone that creates things and posts about it and talks about things and has opinions. And for a while on YouTube, when I was doing that off camera, like the whiteboard animation videos, it felt easier. It felt like I had a shield because no one can see my face. No one could like judge me as a person, like as my appearance, right? They have to judge my words and judge what I'm saying. But ever since I started showing myself on camera more, especially back then when I still had like severe acne, I felt so much like fear of being judged. Like I didn't even need anyone to really tell me that. Most people I feel like are generally kind of nice if your channel is smaller. And I have had comments that were very, very mean for sure. And they did not feel good to read. And I'm getting better at sort of like not letting it get to me. It still does sometimes, but I think over time, the more I'm exposed to it, the more I'll get used to the idea that, yeah, these people exist, people who are just outright mean. But a part of me is also like proud of myself for still doing it, despite the fear, despite like worrying about my appearance, despite everything. I still put myself out there. And to me, that's something I'm proud of. And I feel like I want to continue doing that. And we mentioned insecurities in the title. That's one thing I was definitely very, very insecure about is my physical appearance, because I had severe acne since high school, basically, and didn't get rid of it until maybe like 2 years ago, which is crazy. Like not until my late 20s did I fix my severe acne. It was really, really bad towards the end and in the beginning as well. There was like a middle period where it got better, but then it just got bad again. And I'd have to visit the doctor. Eventually, I went on Accutane. I made a whole video about this. The Accutane didn't work the first time. I used it again. It worked better the second time, but I still get acne now. And the acne that I still get now, sometimes it can be like pretty ugly. Like I hate it. I still hate it, but I still put myself out there despite my insecurities. Another one is height. I think height is a huge one for a lot of people. It's a huge one for me because it's a huge one for a lot of people. It's like society basically has said that the taller you are, the better looking you are, the better off you'll be as a male, especially. And, you know, everyone kind of agrees with that. I don't think that there's like anyone who doesn't like believe that. Because it's sort of like a natural biological thing, at least like based on literally every conversation I've ever had with everyone who has talked about physical appearance. Like height seems to be a really, really big deal for everyone. Like some people can't stop talking about it. So for me, that has been an insecurity that is super annoying because I'm only 5'6", which is really short. And I oftentimes find myself really hating it. I find myself like wishing that I were taller because it would just make me feel overall better, that I would feel more socially accepted, that I would be like, it would be nice to be at least average height for a male. And in my mind, I would just like think to myself that it really just sucks. Like I like if there's something that I could change about myself, that would be it right there. Like the first thing, if like a genie came up and was like asking for wishes or something, like I would probably, and they're like specifically asking about like wishes about physical appearance, right? Because if a genie actually popped up and asked for wishes, then I would wish for way more than just height, obviously. Like there's like so many abilities and powers that would be amazing to have. Like wishing for the power to just like manifest anything you imagine is kind of like what I would wish for, because that would essentially give you any ability. Anyways, that's like other stuff, not related to insecurities. But this is what I'm talking about. It's like I think about it more than I should, more than I need to, and it's very unfortunate. Like sometimes when I'm hanging out with my friends, most of them are taller than me. Not necessarily the girls, but some of the females are like basically my height. So for me, it's always been a big insecurity, and it's something that I've really, really disliked about myself. I just like feel like it just sucks. And I really wish, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, I really wish that PE teacher didn't mention like, oh, you're just going to be the height that you are no matter what you do. Because like, I think had I learned from the beginning that yes, there are things that you do that will basically make you shorter, like I would have avoided those things. Because family wise as well, like I'm definitely the shortest guy out of my cousins, and I am taller than my dad, but my sister is around the same height as me as well. So for me personally, I think that I should have been taller, which is what sort of pains me as well, because my brother is also taller, and my half brother, and and a lot of my cousins are like my height that are female. So it's like I definitely damaged my body somewhere along the way when I did some too many like breakdance, too many like flips and stuff outside of like the safety areas. It was not good. And like to me, it's gonna be an insecurity probably for the rest of my life. I think it's really hard to deal with this one personally. I will probably, I don't know, I'll probably try my best to like get to a point where like it doesn't matter anymore. But honestly, I think like that'll just happen by itself over time. Like at a certain point, I'm just like, whatever. You know, this is not something I can change anymore. But yeah, that's my number one insecurity for sure. And just sort of showcasing that online is always kind of like, I mean, like most of the time you don't really see my height in my videos because I cut myself off from the waist because it's just easier to do that. It's just better composition. And in general, it's kind of hard to shoot your full body in most shots. So it's not like I'm avoiding it. It's just like kind of just naturally what happens when you film yourself. So I guess for that insecurity, it's not like a big deal online, but sometimes I do mention my height, and that sort of is a little bit annoying because, like for instance, my recent video about pull-ups and push-ups, someone asked for my height and weight, and I'm okay with giving that because it's like it's not like dangerous information, right? So I just said I was 5'6" and about 135 pounds, and obviously that indicates that it's easier for me to do pull-ups, right? So that's probably why it was possible to do like closer to 50 pull-ups. But it sucks to be, you know, because I put that information out there. I know I would be judged for it. Like I'm 100% sure when people see that, they're going to be like, oh, he can do that because he's shorter and he's lighter. And they might dismiss the part that it still took a crap ton of effort to do 50 pull-ups and 100 push-ups 30 straight days in a row. But at the same time, you know, it's not like someone said that out loud. It's just a part of my mind that just tells me like that these are thoughts that others have based on logic. And I guess it puts me down a little bit. It's not just a fear of being judged. It's like, it's handling being judged. It's how I cope with it, how I deal with it. And I guess I haven't really come up with a solid strategy, or at least that's part of the reason why I'm talking about it right now, is because I want to figure out what that mindset is going to be moving forward. Like, again, the 10 days, 10 months type of thing is a good one. And then just like not worrying about it, just accepting myself for who I am. Like, this is who I am. This is like how tall I am, how I look, how I sound, how I think. And most of it, I can't change. I can change how I think. And in my opinion, like I talked about this before, the mind, personality, that kind of stuff to me is very important. It tells you more about someone compared to their physicality or how someone looks. And I think for me, I need to remember that. I need to remember it and also just like move forward living that.